Alex had never seen a place like it. A $750,000 luxury cabin tucked away deep in the mountains, hidden from the world. The air was thin but crisp, the trees towering like ancient sentinels, their leaves swaying in rhythm with the wind. The cabin, a masterpiece of stone and wood, sat perched on the edge of a jagged cliff. It seemed to glow softly in the early morning light, an oasis of tranquility amid the vast wilderness. For months, Alex's family had dreamed of this, an escape from the hustle and chaos of city life. But as they pulled up to the cabin, Alex couldn't shake the sense of unease that gripped them. It wasn't the cabin, or even the isolation. It was the quiet. The kind of silence that seemed to press in on you, like something was hiding just beneath the surface, waiting to break free. "Feels like we're the only people left in the world," Alex muttered, eyes scanning the horizon. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting an amber glow across the valley below. The beauty of it all should have been comforting, but instead, Alex felt a strange knot form in their stomach. "Perfect for you," Alex's father, Daniel, said, his deep voice breaking the silence. He was always a man of few words, but his presence was commanding. As the overseer of the entire electrical grid in the region, he held a quiet, unspoken power. Nothing ever seemed to faze him. Until now. The family had celebrated the purchase, imagining weekends filled with warmth by the fire, long hikes in the woods, and lazy afternoons spent by the lake. But something about the cabin felt wrong. It wasn't the place itself. It was the sudden coldness that seemed to settle around them, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. "Just think, Dad. You can finally get some peace and quiet," Alex said with a forced grin, trying to lighten the mood. But even the most mundane thoughts couldn't banish the unease lingering in the air. "Yeah," Daniel replied, his gaze lingering on the distant peaks. "Just need to check the power grid before we settle in. It's all connected up here, you know." Alex nodded. Their father was always working, always thinking, always planning, always in control. But that control also made Alex uneasy. Sometimes it felt like they were living in their father's shadow, always at the mercy of his vast, unseen influence. The family unloaded the car, carrying bags and boxes into the cabin. But as the sun rose higher, the quiet became unsettling, too still. Then, a soft flicker of light from the cabin's interior caught Alex's eye. The electricity was already on. Everything seemed normal, but the feeling in their gut told them otherwise. Suddenly, a harsh crackle broke the silence, a crackling sound, like static electricity charging the air. Alex spun around, eyes narrowing in the direction of the noise. The power lines ran like veins across the landscape, but everything seemed untouched. "Just a storm, probably," Alex muttered, brushing it off. But the unease didn't fade. Instead, it intensified. As the day wore on, the silence grew heavier, and the sense of wrongness deepened. But when night fell and the lights flickered once more, Alex's pulse quickened. The cabin, once a dream retreat, had turned into something far more ominous. Then, the power went out completely. The sudden darkness felt suffocating, as though the entire world had been swallowed whole by a void. Alex blinked, eyes adjusting to the dim glow of the cabin's emergency lights. The silence was more oppressive than ever. The kind of silence that presses in, that makes you question whether you're truly alone, or if something, or someone, is lurking just beyond the edge of your vision. Alex glanced at their father, Daniel, who was already up, moving with a quiet precision that seemed second nature to him. His brow was furrowed, lips set in a thin line, as he made his way toward the circuit box. "Probably just a breaker," Daniel muttered, though his tone lacked its usual certainty. His steady hands worked quickly, flipping switches with practiced ease. But nothing happened. The hum of the cabin's power grid, something Alex had always taken for granted, remained eerily absent. "What the hell?" Alex murmured, a chill running down their spine. "Dad," "You're saying this is just a glitch." But Daniel didn't respond right away. His focus was laser-sharp, his gaze flicking over the electrical panel, checking and rechecking the connections. The unease that Alex had felt earlier suddenly morphed into something more urgent. Their father, always so unshakable, so in control, wasn't acting like himself. "Something's wrong," Daniel finally said, his voice low and tense. "This isn't normal." Alex's heart skipped a beat. The power had gone out before, but never like this. Never so suddenly, so completely, and certainly not without any explanation. "Let's try calling the power company," Alex suggested, though their own voice sounded hollow, as if the suggestion was a feeble attempt to grasp at normalcy. They reached for their phone, but when they unlocked it, the screen blinked out. Nothing but a spinning wheel. No signal, no service. What the hell? Alex tried again, but the phone remained stubbornly unresponsive. Their pulse began to quicken. The isolation of the cabin, the thing they'd once found so peaceful, suddenly felt like a trap. They stepped outside, feeling the cold bite of the mountain air as it rushed over them. The wind rustled through the trees, but otherwise everything was still. No lights in the valley below. No distant hum of civilization. Just nothing. A soft, distant sound caught Alex's attention. It was faint, barely audible, like the sound of a car engine idling far away. But it wasn't the sound of an engine running. It was the deep, rumbling hum of a power transformer, something Alex had grown used to growing up with their father's work. The sound was wrong, though. Too far away. Alex's pulse picked up. "Dad, there's something off about this." Daniel stepped out beside them, squinting into the growing night. "It's fine. Just a temporary issue. Power's probably down for the whole region." "Yeah, but why now? Why here?" Alex's mind raced, searching for logic, searching for a reason. But the answer eluded them. The mountains, the cabin, the isolation, all of it felt too perfect, too neatly aligned, as if they were being watched. Then, without warning, their phone buzzed in their pocket. Alex pulled it out, heart hammering in their chest. It was a message from an unknown number. "It's too late. You've been cut off." Alex froze. The words sent a shockwave of dread through them. Their finger trembled as they typed back, but before they could press send, the phone buzzed again. Another message. "Someone knows you're there, and they won't stop until you're gone." The message sent a chill through Alex's bones. This wasn't just a power outage. Someone had done this, and they were watching. "Get inside," Daniel ordered, his voice now tinged with urgency. "Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone." Alex stood frozen for a moment, the weight of the words settling in like a heavy fog. As they hurried back into the cabin, the world outside seemed even darker than before, more menacing, more alive with unseen danger. But there was something else now, something even more terrifying. They weren't alone. The cabin's walls felt thinner now, as if the very structure was closing in. Alex sat in the living room, eyes darting to the windows, trying to catch a glimpse of something. Anything, moving in the shadows outside. But all they saw was darkness, thick and impenetrable. The wind had picked up, its howls scraping across the roof, a constant reminder that they were isolated, alone, in the middle of nowhere. Daniel moved quietly around the cabin, checking locks and shutters, his face tight with concentration. But even his movements were slower than usual, deliberate, as if he, too, was sensing something lurking just beyond their reach. "Dad, this isn't just about the power, is it?" Alex finally spoke, the words tasting bitter on their tongue. "Someone's doing this on purpose." Daniel paused, his back to Alex. For a moment, Alex thought he hadn't heard them. Then, slowly, he turned. His eyes, those usually calm, calculating eyes, were filled with something Alex had never seen before. Uncertainty. "You're right," Daniel said softly, his voice edged with tension. "But this isn't just some prank. Someone knows who we are. They know what I do." Alex's heart skipped. They had always known their father was powerful. He controlled the electricity grid that powered the entire region. But this felt different. The quiet, hidden power he wielded had always been a safety net, something Alex had taken for granted. Now that very power felt like a target on their backs. "How?" Alex asked, their voice barely a whisper. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked over to the window, pulling back the heavy curtain just a fraction. His eyes scanned the dark expanse outside, but he didn't speak. The silence between them grew heavy, suffocating. Finally, he turned back to face Alex, his expression grim. "There's someone from my past. Someone I thought I'd left behind." Alex's blood ran cold. The weight of his words hung in the air, a haunting promise of danger to come. "Who?" Daniel exhaled, a long, strained breath. "A former employee. He was fired from the company a few years ago. And I thought that was the end of it. But now, I'm not so sure." Alex's mind raced. A disgruntled employee. That didn't sound like much of a threat, until they remembered their father's position. A man with the power to control the entire electrical grid could make enemies in places Alex could never even imagine. Suddenly, a sharp sound sliced through the night. A distant crack, like something heavy had snapped in the forest. Alex's head snapped toward the window, heart hammering in their chest. "Did you hear that?" Alex asked, their voice strained. Daniel's face hardened. "Stay away from the windows." It was too late. Alex moved instinctively toward the glass, pulling the curtain just enough to peer through. The trees were swaying violently, as if pushed by some unseen force. But there was something else. Movement in the shadows. Just beyond the tree line, a figure stood, barely visible in the dark, watching. Alex's breath hitched. The figure was too still, too quiet. It felt like they were being hunted. "I'll handle this," Daniel said, his tone firm, his voice cold. "No, Dad, I think it's already here," Alex replied, their words catching in their throat. Just then, the power flickered again. The emergency lights buzzed briefly, then went out. The entire cabin plunged into darkness. Alex's heartbeat quickened. The only sound now was the frantic pounding of their pulse in their ears, the soft rustle of the wind. The shadow outside, the one they had seen just moments ago, had vanished. But the feeling of being watched remained, and it was growing stronger. "I'm going to make a call," Daniel said, moving toward the phone. But when he reached for it, the line was dead. No signal, no connection, nothing. Alex's stomach twisted into a knot. They were completely cut off. No power, no phone, and someone dangerous, was out there, just waiting for the right moment. "Lock the doors," Daniel said sharply, his voice carrying the weight of something darker than just concern. "Do not open them. Not for anyone." Alex's breath caught in their throat. The walls were closing in, the shadows creeping ever closer. And somewhere, just beyond the darkened windows, the unseen enemy was waiting to make their move. The silence in the cabin was suffocating now, a thick, oppressive fog that seemed to settle into every corner of the room. The only sound was the soft creak of the floorboards under Alex's feet, and even that felt too loud in the stifling stillness. Every time Alex moved, they felt like they were disturbing something lurking just beyond their perception, like an invisible predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Daniel stood near the fireplace, his back to Alex as he quietly checked the locks on every window, double-checking the security system. Though the air of confidence that usually accompanied his movements was gone, his face, usually unreadable, was tight with something that looked like barely contained rage or fear. Alex couldn't tell which one was worse. The phone had been dead for the last 20 minutes, the signal completely gone. There was no way to contact anyone. They were completely cut off from the outside world, with nothing but the whisper of the wind and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot breaking the eerie silence. It was then, As Alex was pacing the room, that the phone buzzed again. The vibration was low, almost imperceptible, but it sent a jolt of panic straight through Alex's chest. They snatched it up, almost dropping it in their haste. The message was brief, too brief, and sent from that same untraceable number. "I see you." The words burned into Alex's mind. They froze, staring at the screen, trying to process the meaning behind them. Their breath caught in their throat. This wasn't just a prank. This was personal. Whoever was out there, whoever had been watching them, they knew exactly where they were. "Who's doing this, Dad?" Alex's voice trembled, the words spilling out before they could stop them. They turned to look at Daniel, but he was already walking briskly toward the kitchen, his steps sharp and deliberate. "We don't know, Alex, and we don't need to know. Not yet. What we need to focus on is staying inside and keeping the doors locked." "But—" "No arguments," Daniel snapped, cutting them off. His voice wasn't angry, but it was fierce. "No one gets in. Understand?" Alex nodded, their throat tight with a growing sense of dread. The phone buzzed again, but this time, it wasn't just the cryptic message. It was a series of photos. Alex opened the first image and felt the blood drain from their face. It was a shot of their own front door, taken from the trees just outside the cabin. Alex's hands shook as they scrolled to the next image. It was a close-up of the cabin's back window, the one Alex had just checked minutes before. The curtains were still drawn, but the figure of a person stood outside, shrouded in darkness. It was impossible to make out their features, but there was no mistaking the figure's stance. They were watching, waiting. "Who?" Alex whispered, their voice barely audible. They turned to look at Daniel, but he was already moving toward the front door, his face set with grim determination. "Dad." "Stay here," he said, his voice low but firm. "I'm going to check the perimeter." "No," Alex nearly shouted. "It's not safe out there." Daniel turned to look at them, his eyes dark with a mix of frustration and something else, something Alex couldn't quite place. "I know what I'm doing, Alex. Stay inside, and don't open the door for anyone, not even me." The command was chilling, final. With a terse nod, Daniel stepped outside, disappearing into the shadows, his figure swallowed by the encroaching night. The sound of the door closing behind him felt like a final verdict. Alex stood frozen, their body vibrating with tension. The minutes stretched on, unbearable. Every second that passed felt like an eternity. The wind howled louder, rattling the windows as if the very world was conspiring against them. Then a sound, footsteps, not outside the cabin, but inside. The soft, deliberate crunch of boots on the wooden floor. Alex's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't Daniel. They turned, eyes wide with terror, and faced the dark hallway leading to the bedrooms. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Someone was inside. Someone had breached the cabin. Without thinking, Alex grabbed the nearest object, a heavy lamp, and raised it defensively, heart thundering in their chest. The footsteps stopped. Then, the air around them seemed to freeze. Not even the wind stirred. The silence was deafening. From the hallway, a voice, soft, almost a whisper, spoke. "You can't hide from me." Alex's heart hammered in their chest, their breath shallow and erratic. The voice that had come from the hallway wasn't one they recognized. It was low, distorted, like the words had been spoken through clenched teeth, a cruel whisper meant to send a chill straight through the bones. For a moment, everything froze. Time, the world outside, the relentless beating of Alex's pulse. The voice was so soft, so deliberate, it seemed to crawl under their skin, making every hair on the back of their neck stand on end. "You can't hide from me." The voice echoed in the stillness, as though it wasn't just in the cabin, but inside their mind, a seed planted in the soil of their thoughts. Fear twisted Alex's stomach into tight knots. They stood frozen, the lamp still gripped tightly in their trembling hands, every instinct screaming at them to run, to hide. But there was nowhere to go. The walls of the cabin felt like they were closing in, pushing them toward whatever darkness was lurking just out of sight. The footsteps started again, slow, deliberate, getting closer. Alex's mind raced, frantic, trying to formulate a plan, but nothing seemed possible. The door to the hallway was ajar, and the shadow just beyond the cracks seemed to grow larger with each passing second. Stay calm. Stay calm. Alex thought desperately, trying to steady their breath. But nothing about the situation was calm. Everything was chaotic. Their phone buzzed again in their pocket, but Alex didn't dare answer it, not with the heavy, oppressive air that filled the room. The message would have to wait. Right now, all that mattered was the immediate threat, the unknown figure just beyond the hallway, the one who was getting closer. The footsteps grew louder. They were right there, just beyond the door, their weight shifting on the floorboards. Alex tightened their grip on the lamp, ready to swing it in a split second if needed. But just as quickly as the sound had started, it stopped. Silence. It was worse than the footsteps. The absence of sound was 1,000 times more unsettling. The figure was standing there, just out of view, but Alex could feel the presence like a weight pressing against them, suffocating in its intensity. The seconds stretched, unbearably slow. Then, a voice, closer this time, barely a breath above a whisper, came from the other side of the door. "I can feel your fear." Alex flinched, the words wrapping around their chest like a vice. They swallowed hard, forcing down the rising panic that threatened to overtake them. They knew they couldn't stay here, couldn't just wait for whatever was lurking in the hallway to make its move. But just as they started to back away, the door handle jiggled, the faintest sound of metal scraping against metal. Someone, or something, was trying to get in. Alex's mind raced. They had to do something, anything. They darted to the side, searching the room for something more useful than a lamp. Their eyes landed on the fireplace poker, its heavy metal head gleaming in the dim light. They grabbed it, the cold steel comforting in their hands as they gripped it tightly, their knuckles turning white. The door handle twisted again, the low click of the lock taunting them. It was only a matter of time before it gave way, before the door was forced open. Think, Alex. Think. They backed toward the windows, glancing nervously at the heavy curtains. They could break the glass, escape into the night, but they didn't know what waited out there in the dark. The figure in the hallway could be waiting for that, too, baiting them, leading them into a trap. And then, in the midst of the tension, the phone buzzed again. This time, Alex couldn't ignore it. They pulled it out, hands shaking. A new message, this one with an image attached. Alex's stomach twisted in horror as the image loaded. Of the cabin's back door, wide open, the silhouette of a man standing just inside the frame, framed by the darkness outside. The door was supposed to be locked. "Dad," Alex shouted, voice breaking. "Where are you?" The phone buzzed again. This time, the message was a single line. "I'm already inside." The blood drained from Alex's face as the phone's screen went dark. "I'm already inside." The words burned into their mind like an open wound, their heart pounding louder than the wind outside. Every instinct screamed to run. But where? The cabin was surrounded by nothing but trees, and the figure was already inside. They were trapped. Alex's breath came in shallow gasps, fingers trembling as they clenched the poker, feeling its cold weight, the only thing between them and the unseen threat. The low, eerie hum of the wind outside was suddenly punctuated by a louder sound, something scraping against the floorboards, slow and deliberate, as if someone was savoring the moment. The footsteps were closer now, each one ringing louder in Alex's ears, like the ticking of a clock counting down to some inevitable fate. The handle on the door rattled again, the lock squeaking in protest. The figure outside was testing their resolve. He was playing with them, letting the tension build until it threatened to suffocate them. Stay calm. Stay quiet. Stay still. The mantra ran through Alex's mind like a desperate prayer. They pressed themselves against the far wall, hidden in the dark corner of the living room, praying the figure wouldn't see them. The flickering light from the fireplace cast long, twisted shadows across the room, the dim glow offering little protection. And then, just as Alex thought they might lose their mind to the crushing silence, a voice spoke again, softer now, almost playful. "I know you're in there." Alex's stomach dropped. They hadn't heard the man approach. He was so close now, right outside the room. The feeling of being hunted was overwhelming, a cold hand creeping up Alex's spine. Every part of them wanted to scream, to run, but they held it in, forcing themselves to remain as silent as possible. Suddenly, there was a loud crash, the unmistakable sound of something breaking. A piece of furniture, maybe a lamp or a chair, had been knocked over. It sounded like it came from the kitchen. Alex's eyes shot to the hallway, where the figure had been. He wasn't there anymore. He'd moved, and that thought alone sent a wave of icy terror flooding through them. The seconds stretched into eternity as Alex's mind raced. They had to get out. They couldn't stay here, waiting for the figure to make his next move. They couldn't just sit and wait to be found. And then, like a cruel twist of fate, the phone buzzed again, this time so violently that it nearly slipped from Alex's hand. They almost didn't want to check, but they knew they had to. It was another message, but this time, there was no image. Just a few short words. "He's behind you." Alex's blood ran cold. They spun around, eyes darting to the empty hallway, the shadowy space that had once felt like a haven. But now, the hallway was darker, more oppressive. Every corner seemed to twist into something menacing. And then, movement. A figure stepped out from the shadows, slow and deliberate. It was too dark to make out their features, but the silhouette was unmistakable. The figure had been watching from the corner of the hallway, waiting for the perfect moment. Alex's mind screamed. How? How could they have missed it? In one swift motion, the man lunged forward, his hand reaching out. The poker was already in Alex's hands, but the shock and terror made their movements slow, clumsy. They swung it at the figure, but the man dodged it with surprising agility, sidestepping the strike as though it were a mere afterthought. Alex's heart hammered in their chest. This wasn't just a random intruder. This man, this figure, was skilled. He was playing them, pulling them into his web with every twist of fate. Before Alex could react, the figure spoke again, his voice a cold whisper that sent a shiver down their spine. "Don't bother," he said, his tone almost amused. "It's too late for that." With a flash of movement, the man lunged forward again, faster this time. But just before contact, a sharp, violent crash shook the entire cabin. The front door flew open with a deafening bang. "Alex." Daniel's voice rang out, urgent, panicked. "Get down." Alex didn't hesitate. They dropped, the poker slipping from their hands as the figure was momentarily distracted by the sound. In that split second, Alex's mind registered the figure's expression, a cold smile, as if he'd expected someone else. But that smile faded as Daniel, gun raised, rushed into the room, his eyes locking onto the intruder. The figure froze for a moment, his smirk fading into a hard line of realization. And then, as quickly as he had appeared, he turned on his heel and bolted toward the back door. "Dad, no!" Alex screamed, scrambling to their feet. But Daniel was already in pursuit, disappearing into the darkness of the night. The door slammed behind Daniel with a deafening crack, the sound reverberating through the empty cabin like the warning of an impending storm. Alex's chest tightened, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Their father, the man who had always been a steady, unshakable force in their life, was now in pursuit of the figure who had terrorized them. But even with the gun in his hand, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were in even greater danger than before. They moved to the door, heart pounding, unsure whether to follow or stay hidden. But the instinct to find Daniel, to stay close to safety, urged them forward. The moment Alex stepped out into the night air, the wind cut through their clothes like 1,000 sharp needles. The ground was damp beneath their feet, and the forest around them seemed to pulse with a dark, unnatural energy. They crept along the edge of the cabin, barely able to see anything beyond the small halo of light cast by the cabin's faint glow. The trees stood tall and ominous, like silent sentinels watching over them. The silence that had once been suffocating now felt like a warning, a quiet before the storm. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, echoing through the trees. Alex froze, their body tensing. The sound shattered the stillness, followed by the distinct thud of a body hitting the ground. "Daniel!" Alex shouted, their voice hoarse with fear. But there was no reply, only the wind howling through the trees. A second shot rang out, this one closer, too close. Alex's heart skipped, and they sprinted toward the sound, their legs moving faster than they ever thought possible. Every step felt like it could be their last, but they didn't dare slow down. The chill in the air seemed to freeze their very bones, but they pushed forward, ignoring the icy grasp of dread tightening around their chest. As they rounded the corner of the cabin, the beam of a flashlight flickered through the darkness, cutting through the trees like a blade. Alex's eyes followed it, heart pounding, until they saw him. Daniel, standing with his back to a tree, his gun still raised but aimed downward. His face was pale, his eyes wide with shock, as though he were seeing something impossible. And then, standing just in front of him, was the figure. The man who had been watching them, hunting them. But now, he wasn't the shadow lurking in the hallway. He wasn't even the intruder in the cabin. No, this man was standing with a calm, almost eerie composure, as though he had expected this confrontation all along. "You should have stayed inside," the figure said, his voice quiet but dripping with malice. Alex's blood ran cold. The man wasn't just any intruder. He was someone who knew their father, someone who had a personal vendetta, something far deeper than a simple robbery or break-in. "Who are you?" Daniel's voice was hard, strained. He raised the gun again, aiming it directly at the man's chest. The figure simply smiled, a chilling expression that seemed to freeze the very air around them. "It's not who I am that matters," he said. "It's who I'm working for." Alex's mind reeled. What did he mean by that? Who was he working for? And why had they come here, to this isolated cabin, to bring this terror to their family? The figure took a step closer, the flashlight beam reflecting off his dark, cold eyes. "Your control over the grid," he continued, his tone darkly amused. "It's become a problem. And problems need to be eliminated." Suddenly, the world seemed to shift, and Alex's breath caught in their throat. This wasn't just about revenge. This wasn't about a grudge. This man, and the people he was working with, had a far larger plan. And that plan involved their father in ways Alex couldn't even begin to comprehend. Before Daniel could respond, the man lunged forward, faster than Alex had ever expected. Daniel fired, but the bullet missed. In the same instant, the figure grabbed Daniel's arm, twisting it with a brutal force, the gun flying out of his hand and skidding across the forest floor. The man's smile widened as he shoved Daniel against the tree, pinning him there with a strength that defied reason. Alex's mind screamed. Every fiber of their being told them to act, to do something, but their body was frozen, paralyzed by fear. "You don't get it," the man hissed, his grip tightening on Daniel's throat. "You thought you were untouchable. You thought the grid gave you power." He leaned in, his breath foul against Daniel's ear. "But it made you a target." Alex's heart hammered in their chest, their minds scrambling to find something, anything, to help their father. They couldn't let him go. They couldn't lose him. "Think, Alex, think." Then, like a spark of lightning in the storm, Alex had an idea. They lunged forward, grabbing a fallen branch from the ground, and swung it at the figure's back with all their strength. It connected with a sickening crack, and the man recoiled, releasing his grip on Daniel just long enough for him to stagger backward. "Run!" Alex screamed. Daniel didn't hesitate. With a surge of adrenaline, he broke free, grabbing Alex's arm and pulling them into the darkness of the forest. But the figure wasn't finished. His voice echoed through the trees, cold and ominous. "This isn't over." The forest was alive with the sound of their hurried footsteps, the sharp crack of twigs breaking underfoot, and the sound of ragged breaths in the cold air. Daniel gripped Alex's wrists tightly, pulling them through the underbrush with a speed that was almost reckless. Every step felt like a race against time. The man's words echoed in Alex's mind. "This isn't over." The tension, the fear, seemed to hang in the air like a dark cloud, pressing down on them with every passing second. Alex could feel their pulse in their throat, the world around them moving in a blur of shadow and light. They didn't know where they were going, just that they couldn't stop running. The trees loomed over them like silent giants, but there was no shelter, no safety. "Dad!" Alex gasped, voice hoarse. "What's happening? Who was that guy?" Daniel didn't answer at first. His eyes were scanning the trees, his hand still clutching Alex's arm like a vice. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke, his voice low, strained. "That man," he began, his words tight with controlled emotion. "He's part of a group, an underground faction. They've been targeting key players in the power sector. People with access to the grid. People like me." The words hit Alex like a punch to the gut. The grid? The very thing that their father had spent years building, controlling, and securing. It had never occurred to them that it could be a target, an object of such dangerous desire. But why? Alex's voice cracked, a mixture of confusion and fear. "What do they want with you?" "With the grid?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. His eyes darted ahead, and Alex could see the tension in his father's posture, the muscles in his jaw clenched so tight it looked like he was holding back something far darker than fear. "They want control," Daniel said finally. "Complete control. They've been sabotaging key nodes in the power system, manipulating things from the shadows. They've been trying to force my hand for months, but I kept them off the grid. Until now." Alex's blood ran cold. They had no idea that the very infrastructure that powered their entire world had become a battlefield. But now it was all too clear. The figure, the cryptic messages, the constant sense of being hunted. It wasn't personal. It was strategic. This was something far bigger than they had ever imagined. "We're not safe," Daniel muttered, as though to himself. "They've been watching us, waiting for the right moment to strike. And that moment is now." Before Alex could respond, a distant sound cut through the air, the low hum of an engine. It was faint at first, but it was unmistakable. Someone was out there. Someone was coming. "We need to get back to the cabin," Daniel said urgently, pulling Alex in the opposite direction. "Now." The cabin. The place that had once felt like a sanctuary now felt like the eye of a storm. They couldn't go back there. Not with the man who had nearly killed them still out there. But where else could they go? The sound of the engine grew louder, the headlights of a vehicle suddenly cutting through the darkness like an oncoming train. Alex's breath caught in their throat as they realized the worst. It wasn't just one figure after them anymore. Daniel pushed Alex behind a thick cluster of trees, both of them crouching low to the ground, trying to remain unseen as the vehicle drew nearer. It was a black SUV, its tinted windows hiding the occupants. The vehicle slowed to a stop near the cabin, its headlights sweeping over the front porch. Alex's mind raced. The vehicle had to be theirs, their pursuers. And this time, they were bringing reinforcements. "Stay down," Daniel whispered, his voice tight with urgency. The door to the SUV creaked open, and two figures stepped out. one tall, broad-shouldered, and the other more slender, agile. They moved with military precision, scanning the area. One of them, Alex couldn't make out the features, turned their head, scanning the trees. It was as if they could sense them, feel their presence. This was it. This was the moment. "We can't fight them off," Daniel whispered, his voice grave. "Not like this. We need to get out of here, head toward the east. There's an old emergency shelter about 2 miles out. We can hide there." Alex nodded quickly, their chest tight with fear. They didn't have a choice. They turned and ran, this time heading in the opposite direction, pushing through the brush as quietly as they could, adrenaline coursing through their veins. The night seemed to close in around them, the darkness pressing in, making every crack of a twig or rustle of a leaf seem deafening. But just as they thought they might make it, the silence was shattered by a voice, sharp, commanding, from the cabin. "Move," the man's voice called, his words cutting through the night. "They're getting away." And then, the unmistakable sound of pursuit, footsteps crunching on the forest floor, drawing closer, faster. It was clear. There was no more running, no more hiding. This had all been a trap. The end was closer than they had ever imagined. And then, just as the sound of approaching footsteps reached its peak, a single distant explosion shook the ground beneath their feet. The forest trembled as the night was split open with the deafening roar of a blast. Daniel turned to look at Alex, his face pale but determined. It was too late. This was only the beginning.